not familiar with ecomaine, I'll give you just a quick introduction into who we are and what we do. Hopefully you guys can all hear me okay. ecomaine is a municipally owned nonprofit organization that's owned by 20 Maine municipalities. And basically we're the facility where your waste goes. We have several facilities, one that manages solid waste, so your household trash, and then we've got another facility on site here in Portland that manages your recycling. So as I just said, we've got waste to energy technology. So your trash comes into one giant facility here in Portland. You can find us right on Outer Congress. We're right across from the highway. You can actually see it there in that bottom left-hand corner. So we take in municipal waste, we take your household garbage, we burn it in a giant fire at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we use that waste to make renewable electricity. So we are burning trash, we've got steam turbines that we heat up with that burning trash, and then we're able to make up to 14 megawatts of electricity from trash. Of course, we don't want to throw everything away, so we also have a recycling facility right next door that processes about 35,000 tons of recycling every year. Trash gets a little bit more. They've got about 175,000 tons of trash. And then we've also got to store that trash after we've burned it. We've made it much, much smaller, about 90% smaller, but that ultimately has to go to our ashfill and landfill space, which is just a couple miles down the road. And then I'm gonna, I've got this map here of our service area. I'm gonna do a quick poll with you guys just to ask about recycling. And we'll do that first. And then I wanna know where you guys are coming from. So after you finish that poll, we're asking about your confidence in the recycling that you're doing at home. So feel free to fill that out. And then when you're done, if you can just leave a comment in the chat box about where you live in the state of Maine, or if you're coming from out of state, we want to know where all of you are from so that we can better educate and make sure that if you are an ecomaine community, then this is relevant for you. If not, then maybe we can speak a little bit about some of the other facilities in the state of Maine if you've got questions about where your stuff goes. So yeah, leave that in the chat box after you finish the poll. And then we'll have the poll results up as well. Oh, somebody from Texas. Very cool. So I'm seeing Old Town, Castine, Bangor, somebody from Whitefield, South Portland, Portland, Kittery, Cumberland, Brunswick, and Westbrook. Lots of different places. I don't think I've seen anybody from the same town yet. Very cool. Are we all set to close the poll, Lena?
Are you guys seeing the poll? I haven't seen any responses come through on my end.
Okay, I submitted mine. So it did show up. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I will end the poll now then, and we'll see what happens.
Perfect. Yeah, and for folks at home, we're learning with you. So this is our first session of 5, and you know, we're doing the best we can. So thank you guys for being flexible and patient with us, and we're all in this together. Definitely in a new world, doing all of our programming on Zoom rather than in person. So looks like we've got the poll results. And most people feel fairly confident that when they're recycling something that it's actually recyclable. Some people maybe a little less confident, some neutral, and some disagree. And then a small amount are strongly agreeing. So hopefully we'll be able to play Mythbusters with you today. We'll give you a virtual tour of the facility so you can see where everything goes and understand a little bit more about the why, you know, why things are recyclable versus not recyclable. So maybe you'll have a change in opinion later, but hopefully you'll all be experts by the end of the virtual tour. All right. So moving on, I'm going to give you a little bit of history about ecomaine and kind of who we are and how we got started. and then we'll dive into the virtual tour. So in 1976, this is quite a while ago, the cities of Portland, South Portland, Scarborough, and Cape Elizabeth all got together to trade in their municipal landfills. They all had their own private dump, and they established regional waste systems, or RWS, and they purchased 240 acres of jointly owned landfill. So this was their first effort to kind of consolidate all of their trash and pool their resources together to have one system that worked for everyone. Over that time, they expand their service to include more than 20 municipalities within southern Maine particularly, but some in more of the western Maine foothills and those areas. And in their growing partnership, these communities invested good money to build that waste to energy facility that we still have today, and reduce the amount of trash that's going to the landfill. So we've got 20 municipalities. They're all sending their stuff to waste to energy, reducing their waste by 90%. And then what? It's going to the landfill. We want to avoid landfilling as much as possible. So we don't want to throw everything away. So in the 1990s, we used our former transfer station. We recycled that building, and it was originally used to bale up our trash and send baled cubes of garbage to the landfill. And we used all of that material and all of that equipment to instead process recyclables. So our old baler that we've had since the 70s is still in our facility today, and now it's baling up our paper or glass, our metals and other material for recycling. And then flash forward to kind of present day, RWS is no more. We now go by ecomaine, and that rebranding kind of came when we established the single sort recycling program for the state of Maine. So that made things much easier for folks at home. Before that, recycling was all source separated, and some of my friends here in this group that have or are living in different towns might still be doing this this source separation of recyclables, where you've got a separate bin in your house and at the transfer station for all your different materials. We noticed that when we were source separating, we weren't getting nearly as much material. So when we created single sort recycling in the state of Maine and we added all of this technology, it made it much easier for residents to recycle, and we were recovering more tonnage than ever. So we've also grown and expanded a little bit more. We are not just 20 municipalities anymore. We're still a nonprofit. We're still owned by those 20 towns. But we include much more communities now through contracts. So we've got anywhere from Andover and Freiburg to Kittery and Lemoyne. So we're pretty much all over the state. We kind of touch lots of different areas. You saw the map before. But yeah, we've got a much wider range of service area now. And before we had waste to energy and recycling technologies, all of our waste was taking up space in landfills. And growing up, I remember this all too well. I grew up in a landfilling community, and I remember hurling my bags of garbage into the giant trash mountain. This picture right here, I believe, is of Hatch Hill in Augusta. So for folks who live in central Maine area or who have lived in that area might be familiar with using that landfill. And there are lots of issues that surround raw waste landfilling. Not only does it take up a lot of space just to store our garbage, but it also has issues with methane emissions. It's a potent greenhouse gas that can make our planet quite a bit warmer. It also produces leachate, which is contaminated. It's like a slushy of all sorts of germy water, and that can contaminate our water systems. It also attracts pests and other vectors. You can see in that picture right there, there's lots of seagulls, but I've also heard some really good anecdotes from folks who have seen bears at landfills, raccoons, rats, even bald eagles who like to scavenge through the trash. So that's certainly not good for them to eat all that garbage. And then landfilling, last and certainly not least, is very expensive. It costs a lot of money to buy that land in the first place. And then to put in all of the environmental protections that you need in order to keep that groundwater safe, and all of the environment around that landfill protected. And then you have to pay for that even beyond closure. So even after a landfill is closed, you still have to pay to deal with the methane emissions. and you still have to, you know, pay to deal with the leachate and the maintenance of that area for the years to come. So not the best long-term solution for our waste. We want to find ways around that. And that's why ecomaine really firmly believes in something called the waste hierarchy. So our mission statement tells it pretty easily. We provide comprehensive long-term solid waste solutions in a safe, environmentally responsible, economically sound manner. And we're a leader in raising public awareness of sustainable waste management strategies. So this means that at any, you know, opportunity, we want to practice that reduce, reuse, and recycle. I'm sure most of you have heard that before, but it's really important that we focus on source reduction and reducing the waste in the first place to avoid landfilling, you know, promote the reuse of materials and, you know, keeping things at home instead of throwing them away. Even if they go in the recycling, we're getting more better and higher uses for our materials if we reuse them before we dispose of them. And then recycling comes in third. And that's followed by composting or anaerobic digestion. So that's for our organics to keep those out of the landfill. Then waste to energy technology. It's still, you know, more preferred to landfilling all of our raw trash. So to get started, once the stuff leaves your house, it could leave through the transfer station if you're bringing it to the dump, or you're dropping off your recycling at one of our silver bullets, like you see in the top right corner. That stuff has to go somewhere. This is a really cool video. This is one of the dual-sided trucks that collects recycling and trash from Portland, well, South Portland, Scarborough. Saco also has these trucks. And there are several other municipalities that are getting these as well. They've got the robotic arm that picks up the cart, dumps it in the back of the truck, and then they've actually got 2 compartments in the back of that truck so that they can do both collections in one trip. And then they're able to just kind of flip the door and take trash in one side and recycling in the other. So no matter how your stuff gets to us, it comes to our facility in Portland, and then it ends up on our tipping hall floor. So from your curbside or from your transfer station, it gets dumped out here on our tipping hall floor. We've got somebody on that floor now that inspects and does kind of quality assurance and makes sure that the materials going into recycling are safe. If you would believe, we get lots of crazy stuff in recycling, so we want to be prepared. But this front loader is taking a lot of the work out of the job and scooping up that material, putting it onto a conveyor belt, and then it's going to go run through the plant and through all of the equipment. This sorting process, it's not a 3-minute presentation for me, but it does take this material roughly 3 minutes to find its home in the plant. So it's not too long. It's a pretty quick process for us to find the right bin to put these things in when we separate them out here at ecomaine. The first piece of equipment that we use to sort things out is our rubber stars. I have an example of them in here, and when we're done with the video, I can show you what one looks like from close up. But these are a series of spinning rubber stars, and they're used to sort out cardboard and other types of fiber. So the big stars sort out the cardboard because the cardboard pieces are much bigger. And then we use a smaller set of rubber stars to sort out our paper. So as you can see, they're spinning. Sometimes we get things like tanglers, so things like strapping or plastic films, or a garden hose. Some of these materials might get stuck, and that's why those are recycling don'ts. If you might have noticed there was a bag of garbage that kind of flew over the top of these rubber stars. And then we get things like textiles, like bed sheets, you know, somebody's banner from the 4th of July. All of those things can get tangled up in these rubber stars as they're trying to sort out the cardboard. And the other stuff is falling through these screens. So the cardboard goes over and the rest of the stuff falls through. The same thing's happening here with our paper. We have much smaller stars and they're a little bit more angled so that the paper kind of floats up and pops over the top like popcorn. And then the rest of the stuff is gonna slowly fall to the bottom and settle through and get kind of sifted out. So the paper floats over the top. The rest of the materials are falling down. And that's how we're able to sort out all of that paper. And again, the tanglers are a big problem for our cardboard and our paper sorting screens. they can cause some major inconveniences and even some equipment shutdowns. You know, if we get metal cable that gets wound up around these rubber stars, it can take a long time to get those out. It can sometimes take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours to pull out tanglers from the plant. But for the most part, those rubber stars do a really good job. This is the paper coming out. And then in just a second here, you can see the rubber stars, they're full of tanglers and they're trying to spin and do their job and having a hard time of it. So once they get that gunked up, that's time for us to go in and cut that stuff out. All right. So as this finishes up, we'll talk about the next part in this process. Some of this stuff does go through manual separation as well. So, you know, after we sort out the cardboard, the conveyor belt goes through a small white room where we have people picking out trash. And then there's another opportunity with just paper. As paper is going on the conveyor belt, we've got people stationed in areas there to pull out any contamination. So they'll find things like plastic bags. Sometimes we get things like dirty diapers, all sorts of weird stuff that you might imagine somebody accidentally threw in their recycling bin, or maybe there was some wish cycling going on there where somebody was really hopeful that ecomaine could take that you know, giant plastic lid or something like that, and it got missorted, and we have to manually pull out those contaminants. The next thing beyond the paper that we sort out in our facility is the metals. I've got a cute little GIF there in the bottom of the screen with a scene from Toy Story 3. If you haven't seen it, I won't give you any spoilers. But there is a scene there where we're all getting a ride on a conveyor belt and a magnet picks up our buddy Slinky. So he gets lifted up because he's made of ferrous metals. And he's attracted to that magnet that's in that conveyor belt, and then the conveyor belt will drag it into the right container. So the magnet's super powerful. It's not a very cell phone friendly area, but that picks up the ferrous metals, and then anything that's non-ferrous, so not steel or tin or iron. It's usually the aluminum cans that people are recycling. So your soda cans or maybe your aluminum foil, that's gonna go to our reverse eddy current, which is basically like a reverse magnet that repels the aluminum in the opposite direction. So one point I will make here is that it's super important that our containers are empty when we're recycling, because if those, you know, if that soda can has a little bit of soda left inside, or if somebody shoved a couple napkins in their soda can or something like that and put it into the recycling bin, it's gonna be too heavy to get that projection into the right container. So it's not going to find its way. So we want to make sure that if we're recycling, we want to make sure those containers are really empty. They don't necessarily have to be perfectly clean. So if they've got a little bit of residue, that's not a big deal. They'll still get sorted out and that's fine. But empty containers are definitely one of the more important things. After we pull out the metals, I don't have a video to share for this one, but we do break our glass in the facility. So we've taken out the cardboard, the paper, and the different types of metals, both ferrous and non-ferrous. And then we break our glass using a series of metal stars. So we saw the rubber stars in action as they're spinning on axles. There's a little bit of separation between them. So some things can fall through and other things will float over. These metal stars are really, really close together and they're meant to shatter that glass. And when glass gets shattered in the plant, it's going to fall through the screens, and then it goes into a trommel where we ground it up a little bit more, because we don't want shards of glass everywhere, because that could be really dangerous and could hurt somebody. But if it's in a trommel, we can ground it down so it's just the right size and it's a little bit, you know, less sharp to the touch. And it looks kind of like what we've got in the image there on the left-hand side. And the glass that we recycle ultimately gets reused. It could be reused by ecomaine. It could be reused by other companies as well. We leave that open for folks to take if they have a project in mind and they want to get in touch with us. But a lot of big companies will use it to act as a clean fill for development sites. They can use it to replace gravel. I know we use it in our roadways and the landfill occasionally, so that you know, we don't need to spend so much money on getting gravel when we've got glass right there that we can use. And it also is used to make some pretty awesome countertops. So if you ever take a visit to EcoMaine's facility in real life, certainly, you know, in months to come, we'd love to have people come and visit us. But our bathroom sinks at EcoMaine are made out of our recycled glass bottles and jars. So we've got a kitchen counter that's made out of over 1,000 bottles. And then the bathroom sinks that you can see here, it's a double sink, and that one's got 315 glass bottles and jars mixed in there. So there are companies in the greater Portland area that have taken our glass and they've used it for that kind of repurposed, which is really cool. And lastly, so we've sorted out our fibers, we've sorted out our different types of metals, we've sorted out the glass, we've broken that, crushed it up and sent it away. The last thing that we sort out in our plant is our plastics. And this video I'll play a couple times because it's pretty short, but we use an optical sorter for one type of plastic. So our plastics that get recycled at EcoMaine have to pass a 3-question test. So if you have any questions about plastics recycling, it's definitely, you go through the 3-question test and hopefully you'll be an expert. Each of the plastics that you recycle should have that little chasing arrow in the triangle to let you know what the resin code is. We accept plastics numbers 1 through 7 at our plant, as long as they also pass the other 2 questions of our test. So that's our first question, is does it have that symbol with a 1 through 7 in it? The second question is it a rigid plastic? So we want hard plastics, not soft, squishy plastics. So for example, if you're shopping at the grocery store, you might get a single-use plastic bag that has a symbol on it, but unfortunately that is a squishy plastic that becomes a tangler in our plant. And so we can't take those kinds of plastics. Anything that's stretchy or rippy, or you can crumple it all the way in your hand, is not a rigid plastic, so those don't pass the test. But we do accept any hard plastics. So even that like Poland Spring water bottle that you might be recycling, or you get a soda bottle or something like that, you might be able to crumple it up a little bit, but it's still a rigid plastic. It still keeps its shape and you can't stretch it or rip it or tear it. So that's the second question, is it rigid? The third question is it a container? So this is the one I think that trips up a lot of people when they're trying to recycle. And that's why we get things like plastic lids by themselves a lot of the time, or other types of like bulky plastics and things. We want our containers find their way in the plant very easily. Things like plastic coffee cup lids. So if you have a paper coffee cup with a plastic lid, you'll want to remove the plastic lid, but that lid by itself is not going to get sorted correctly in our screens. Ultimately, what happens to that plastic lid is it gets mixed in with our paper and then contaminates our paper. So we want nice rigid plastic containers with that symbol and the number 1 through 7 on them, and that passes the test for EcoMaine plastics recycling. So here at EcoMaine, I'll play that video one more time. Our number 1 plastics, we use an optical sorter, which scans the chemicals that are inside that number 1 plastic. Different numbered plastics have, that resin code means that they have different chemicals inside them to help them do their job. So we're looking for number 1s here. So that's stuff like your single-use water bottle or your strawberry container, or if you get boxed salads at the grocery store, those tend to be number 1 plastics. You can look at home. And what happens here is it's scanning with that beam of light, and then there's a puff of air that sends that plastic in an upward trajectory into the right container. The rest of the plastics keep on going, and you can see in the picture over here on the bottom left-hand side, we have a room with conveyor belts and people stationed there to manually sort out the rest of the plastics. So they sort out by our number 2s. And those are things like your shampoo and laundry detergent bottles. Those ones are colored plastics, so those go in one bin. And then we have our number 2 natural plastics, which are things like milk jugs, or maybe apple cider or vinegar containers. Those are made with number 2 natural plastic, and those go into another container. And then the rest of the plastics get mixed into a 3 through 7 bale. So those ones, when they leave EcoMaine, they'll have to be sorted and separated one more time. But unfortunately, because we're using an old transfer station as our recycling center, we don't have a lot of room to have different separating and sorting stations for them. And we're also limited in our storage. So we'll send those out as bales of 3 through 7 plastic. And lastly, once everything's been sorted, we have to bale that stuff up and get it ready to go out to the markets to turn into brand new wonderful things. So here you can see, this is our original baler. This is the Harris baler that we've had since the 1970s. It's hard at work still today. And this is baling up our cardboard bales. So you can see here, it's coming out of the baler. These are about 1 ton to 2 ton blocks. Some things are a little bit heavier than others. And then our buddy Richard here, who drives the forklift, he's flipping that over and giving it a visual inspection. He wants to make sure that those bales look as clean on the outside and look like just bales of cardboard. If he sees anything that doesn't belong, he's going to pull that out manually. You can see in just a second here, he's pulling out what looks like some plastic bags that have been mixed in with the cardboard. And that looks like a grain bag as well. So those are another type of, flimsy plastic packaging. So he's pulling those out. He wants to make sure that's nice, clean cardboard. And then coincidentally, this video was shot during a truck day. So he's loading up that cardboard into the back of a truck where it can go to somewhere like Massachusetts or Pennsylvania to be turned into brand new cardboard. You can also see some of the other stored bales that we have outside there, as well as our waste to energy building in the background. So when you recycle all of your items, what happens to them after they leave ecomaine? They go to other manufacturing facilities somewhere within the United States. Sometimes we have global markets for recycling, but for the most part, our recyclables stay here in the United States, or maybe they go up to Canada. For processing, some of the locations in Canada are a little bit closer than some of our United States contacts. But we take that trash, somebody's discarded item, and we turn it into treasure. So that newspaper could become paperboard. That's a pretty easy one to see. If you look on the inside of a cereal box, you can kind of see the fibers there that were used to make that. Or construction paper or egg cartons. Those are pretty easy ones to tell. You can kind of see that they've been made of old paper fibers. Metal cans can be melted down again and turned into rebar for construction, or they can be used to make appliances. All sorts of other materials can be made from recycled material there for metals. And then the plastics also have some really cool applications as well. So things like our milk jugs can turn into plastic lumber, which could be anything from a plastic deck for your backyard that's weatherproof, to your Adirondack chair that you're sitting out in this nice weather, or a picnic table that's outside. If you're familiar with some of the beaches in South Portland, there's a playground out on Higgins Beach that's made entirely out of milk jugs. So we always tell the little kids that we do outreach with that if they are ever in the area of South Portland, it's their homework to go play on that playground and go check out the milk jug play sets. Other things like laundry detergent bottles can turn into frisbees. They can be stadium seats. Things like your single-use plastic water bottles can turn into textiles. They can become carpet or t-shirts. Lots of other, common items can be made from recycling items. And then if you have questions about, whether something can be recycled and turned into something brand new and useful, we have some tricks for you. So I already mentioned the 3 rules of plastics. That should be really helpful in getting you familiar with whether or not a plastic item should go in the recycling bin or not. And those rules are generally the same across the board. It may differ if you're in one of the municipalities that sends their stuff somewhere else. So definitely check with your local programs, or if you have questions about your local programs and want to know a little bit more, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can do some research for you. But if you're still not sure, we also have an online database called the Recycler Pedia. It's an app you can download on your smartphone, or you can go to ecomaine.org/101 and you can search in there. And it's kind of like the Google of where does this go? Which bin does it go in? So if you have questions about whether or not a toilet paper roll or whether or not gloves can be recycled, any questions that you might have about a particular item that's, you know, troubling you right now, you can ask it there. And if we don't have an answer, you can actually add in a suggested item. So you can suggest that item and we'll get the notice that somebody wants to know about, you know, maybe it's a bike tire. So we'll get that notice and we'll get to work to find out where the best place to dispose of that would be for you. So those are ready and they're free and accessible resources for you. And you can always reach out to the folks here at ecomaine for more help or more questions. And I'm happy to take questions about specific items here as well. But I also just really want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know this is the lunch hour for most people, so if you're on a break, thank you for taking time during your break to be with us. Thank you for, you know, just being here and being willing to learn about recycling. It can certainly seem challenging, and we want people to have the knowledge and the tools to do it right. So please reach out to us with your questions. I've got some time here. We budgeted a little bit longer. This presentation wasn't as long as I thought it would be. So we've got plenty of time to answer your questions. Feel free to leave them in the chat box if you have any, and we'll take care of all of those in just a second. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And please let us know if there's anything that we can do to better support you in your recycling efforts at home or in your town. And we really want to make sure that we're keeping that stuff out of the landfill. So here's our contact info. Please make sure if you have questions, these are the places to reach out to us. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can send us a message to any of those. You can also call us by phone. Or you can send an email to info@ecomaine.org. That email goes directly to Lena and myself. So we can answer any of your questions there as well. If you leave today and then you're like, oh no, I forgot, I should have asked about this particular item. So feel free to put, reach out to us that way. So I will turn it around and we will take some of these questions here. One question was, let's see, should we crush milk jugs and reattach the caps? That one came in to me. So with milk jugs, I think the best way to keep those recycled and make sure they get sorted correctly in the plant is if we leave them intact. You can reattach, you can keep the caps on those bottles. That's the best way to make sure that they get to the right spot in the recycling plant, because those caps are really, really tiny. They end up littering our floor if they're separated from their their bottle or their jug. So if you are recycling a milk jug, it's best to just leave it inflated the way that it is, and keep the cap on. And then when we go to bale it, we'll crush it up nicely. But that's the best way that we can make sure that it gets sorted correctly, because crushed plastics can act like flat paper. And then get sorted into the wrong spot. So let's see, what else do we have here? Got a question about e-waste recycling. So we have a special event every year for e-waste collection and recycling. We're not really sure how that's going to be affected by COVID-19, and we usually do it in September. So we'll be playing that by ear. We might do our e-waste recycling event separate from our open house this year. It used to be an event that we did together to draw people to our facility and get them to take a tour. But last year we had over 1,500 people, and we're not really sure how safe that might be, due to what's going on with COVID. So we do a one day a year event for e-waste recycling for free. A lot of transfer stations will take e-waste for a fee, or you might be able to look up some of the product stewardship options for certain types of electronics. So things like, computers or lithium-ion batteries. those things have to be recycled in a very particular way because of the chemicals that are in them. And they've also got some precious minerals and materials that need to be recycled appropriately. So some of the retailers will actually take those things back. The easiest way to know is when you're buying the material, if you want to just do a quick check with your with the retailer while you're there, and see if they'll take back that printer or take back that computer when you're all done. Same deal with like TVs and stuff like that. But a lot of transfer stations will take those materials, and they might charge a fee for them. Or they might have an e-waste collection day on their own. So you can check with the municipality about that. Let's see. Was told by a worker at my local single sort that if I leave the thin plastic lining on the rigid container that it will be accepted. So are you talking about, I'm responding to Jordan's question on the group chat. So are you talking about the plastic label that might be around like a water bottle or something like that? Or maybe, oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that plastic sleeve, it'll still be accepted. If you want to remove those would go in the trash because it would be a flexible packaging. But it is something that we can still take whether or not it has that sleeve on it or not. So it's totally fine if you want to leave it attached, and then it'll get recycled, you know, it'll go to that plastic recycling facility and get chopped up with the container. So you can leave it on, or you can take it off and just make sure that that goes into the trash if you're separating them. Let's see what other questions we've got. Question about glass recycling. So one of the tricks with the tricky parts about glass recycling is the fact that it's very heavy to transport. And so a lot of municipalities are having a hard time finding homes for it that are close to close to them so that it's efficient. So that glass recycling, again, I think we'd really want to encourage people to reuse their glass as much as possible. One thing that I do, I hate throwing glass away. So unless it's broken, I really, or recycling my glass even. So unless it's broken, I really try to reuse them as much as possible. I've actually found some container libraries with some of the local zero waste stores. For example, there's a shop in South Portland that does refills for soap and laundry detergent and things like that. And when they are hurting for containers, when they ask for donations from the public. So I save my glass to reuse in that way. And then let's see. So yeah, and then if we're not recycling them, they're certainly gonna be going into the trash, and that's not ideal either, because whether they end up in a landfill, or they end up in the waste to energy facility, they're still eventually going to be sitting in a hole in the ground. So we don't really want to do that with our glass. Plus it's, again, really heavy. So if you're paying for tipping fees for trash, you're paying a lot of money to dispose of that glass. So reuse them if you can. Again, the collection, we want to advocate if they can continue to collect the glass, then that would be ideal. We're getting a couple questions about shredded paper. So this does depend on the town that you live in. ecomaine has a pretty open policy about accepting shredded paper, and it's the only time that we'll accept plastic bags. So we want our shredded paper to be contained so that it's not confetti in the plant, because as you can imagine, shredded paper going through those rubber stars is going to throw them up in the air, and it's just going to be a party in our recycling facility. So we will take shredded paper. It's got to be contained in a clear plastic bag here at ecomaine. But again, other collections have different programs. I'm not sure about Brunswick's program, which I know Mary's referring to. But here at ecomaine, we can take them in transparent, clear plastic bags so we can see what's inside, and we can actually rip that bag open and dump it into the paper. So it really does depend on the program. Let's see. Other questions? For broken glass, so going back to glass, for broken glass, if it goes into the recycling, that could be a potential risk for workers in the plant. We do shatter our glass in a closed, contained system that keeps everybody safe because it's in a giant metal box. So it's not spraying out and hurting anybody. So if there's broken glass, so like a broken bottle or a broken jar, that's something that we would prefer would go into the trash. Or if you can repurpose it in some way, use it for a mosaic or something like that, that's ideal. But again, for broken glass, it's probably the safest option to put it into the trash. You might want to contain it in a paper bag of some sort or some sort of container so that it doesn't puncture through the bag and cut somebody. So yeah, for safety purposes, it would be easiest to throw that one in the trash. Let's see. Somebody has a question just about ecomaine in general. We've got about 80 employees. We are municipally owned, but we're our own company. So everyone here is employed by ecomaine. And yeah, so believing in the mission, I think there's definitely a lot of people that really practice sustainability here. And, particularly on the education side, I wouldn't be a very good educator if I didn't believe in the mission and, and in diversion. So I think that most people here are doing a lot of really great work. And I think they're also some of the unsung heroes, those people that, are managing your trash day in and day out. Our waste to energy facility is a 24-hour operation. So we've got people here at 2:00 in the morning. So they've got a very hard job. And we definitely really appreciate the work that they do. So we definitely want to make sure that those guys feel appreciated and that they're getting good benefits too. Let's see here what other questions you've got. Why does Styrofoam have a recycling symbol on it? That's a really good question. Styrofoam is number 6 plastic. It's polystyrene, and it's an expanded polystyrene. So it's been altered somehow to make it light, fluffy, and airy. I think it's a chemical recycling process to kind of blow it up and make it so light and fluffy. In order to recycle that, it is possible. It's just not very efficient or effective for folks who live very far away from a processing facility. Styrofoam is very lightweight, which makes shipping very good for packaging, but not very good for trying to recycle it as a commodity and sending it somewhere in large quantities. So Styrofoam, in order to recycle it for ecomaine, we would have to hold on to that stuff for a long, long time. And then put it on an 18-wheeler once we had enough bales of the material to fill a truck, and then send it to New Jersey. And the emissions associated with that journey to New Jersey to be recycled actually exceed the emissions from, the actual recycling of the material. So unfortunately, it's better to throw it in the trash. Luckily, ecomaine does have that waste to energy technology, so we can burn that trash to generate electricity. So that Styrofoam, when it's going in the trash here, it's going to be used to make renewable energy rather than just sitting in a landfill. But yeah, every program is a little different. If you live in New Jersey, then recycling Styrofoam can be really easy. But here in Maine, we're a little bit further away from those types of manufacturing and processing facilities, so it's a little bit harder to recover those materials. But again, it's part of that. Just because something has the recycling symbol on it, we see that a lot of the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that it can be accepted everywhere. So it's really important to make sure that that's something that's accepted in your municipality. So checking, the resources that we have available on our website. We have a list of do and don't, do's and don't recycle items. And Styrofoam is one of the top no's because it's a common contaminant. We get it a lot of the time. And that's probably because it's got that symbol on it. So a lot of those, it's just the resin code for the type of plastic that they use. And so they just slap that on there to let people know that that's made of a number 6 plastic. But it has confused lots of people because then they associate that with going in your curbside recycling bin. Same deal with toothpaste tubes. So sometimes we'll see those recycling bins on the toothpaste tubes. It might be made of a good plastic, but unfortunately it's kind of a flexible packaging. It's not a rigid plastic container. So those ones are not something that we can accept in our facility. If there are ways to recycle those kinds of things, there are product stewardship programs out there. For example, there's a company called TerraCycle, which is based out of New Jersey, and they do a mail-in program for different types of recycling. So, for example, they have these collection boxes for chip bags and juice pouches. So they take those and they chop them up and they turn them into things like backpacks. And then they sell those backpacks, and it helps them pay for that cost of collection and processing. So toothpaste tubes could be recycled in a program like that, but not necessarily in a curbside program, just because of the technology that we have available to us right now. And hopefully, if we can get people to reduce, reuse, and invest in recycling, one of the things that I use is I actually use little toothpaste tabs. They're just little tablets that I pop into my mouth to brush my teeth, and those come in a glass jar. So, if it's possible, could we switch to something like that, or will we see more of those in the future? It's anybody's guess. But for right now, unfortunately, toothpaste tubes are not something that we can take. And there are options for recycling, but they would go to the trash. Let's see. Lena, are you seeing questions that I'm missing?
I see a few that I can answer.
Go for it.
So we have a few questions here about our process of converting or getting energy from the combustion of trash that we do here. So what happens with our waste, which I think we may at some point do a tour of as well. We might do a virtual tour of our waste to energy facility. But what we do is we take municipal trash and we combust it at 2,000 degrees. What we call, where we combust the trash is obviously in an encased location, and on the inside of that, basically it's a box, and on the inside of that box there are tubes that have water running through them. And so when the water goes in, it is water, and then when it comes out, it is steam. So we use turbines to generate energy from the steam, and so we are generating that energy through that process of steam generation through the combustion of the trash. So once that energy is generated, we send it out into the grid, which is kind of infamous in and of itself. But when we do that process, it's going out to the grid, and it is able to not only fuel and power all of our facilities here, so our offices, our waste to energy facility, our recycling plant, our landfill, all of that, and our 2 electric vehicles that we have to do education and things. It also goes and is able to fuel approximately 15,000 homes. So what happens there, we don't get told at exactly where our energy goes once it's put into the grid, but it could do the equal amount of that number of households. So it could be powering commercial buildings and things instead. So yeah, that's how we are able to generate electricity from our trash. And then when we do combust that trash, there of course are things in the trash that are contaminants, and we of course do not want those contaminants to get out into the air. So we do have an environmental friendly process to help us remove those pollutants from the steam that comes out of our stack here. So what you're seeing when you drive by us on 95 is 97% water vapor. So the other 3% are contaminants, and we have a number of different processes in place to remove those contaminants from the steam that leaves our stack. To get into that, I think it would take quite a bit of time, so we're going to save that for our waste to energy tour, but we will assure you that we are monitored by the EPA every single day, and we actually do it many times throughout the day, so it's monitored nearly by the minute. And we of course are not only complicit with what they have put on us in terms of regulations, almost always we are very far below their recommendations here. So there's very little that we do put out in terms of emissions, and that has been approved by the EPA on an ongoing basis. So I think the other question was about composting. Here at ecomaine, we do have a section of our waste to energy tipping hall for composting. We don't have a way to drop that off here, but there are certain communities around the Portland area that do bring compost to us, if that makes sense. And we have our compost picked up by a company in Exeter, Maine called Agra Energy. Then I'm not entirely positive what exactly the communities are that bring us compost, but Vanessa might be able to tell you that. So that being said, we kind of allow the towns to open up composting programs, and we will accept that from them if that's something that they decide to do.
Yeah, essentially we're like a consolidator for food waste at ecomaine. We've got a little bit of space on our tipping hall floor. So we've allowed municipalities to bring their food waste to us via their food taxis. Like it could be Garbage to Garden who brings something here, or it could be, it could be AgriCycle who's working with the regional Hannafords. So all of the Hannafords in New England and quite a few throughout the Northeast actually send their food waste to this anaerobic digester. So there are partnerships. So we get the food taxis, bring the food to us. We hold it here and keep it safe for a little while until a much larger truck, for efficiency, we want to make sure it's a nice big truck so that we're sending all of that food waste in one trip. But all of that food waste goes to Exeter, and then it goes into that anaerobic digestion process where they take that food and they turn it into, they take the methane gases of that food in their closed system, and they use that to make natural gas, which can fuel their plant and be used to make electricity that, or other types of natural gases that can power school buses and things like that. And then they also take the liquid and the solid waste from that food waste. They separate the two. The liquid waste is super nutrient rich. It's a really great fertilizer. They spray that on crops at the farm right next door. They work with Stonyvale Farm. And then they also take the solid waste, because they also add cow manure into this process as well. So cow manure goes into the food waste, into this kind of slurry. And then the solid waste at the end of this process, it's really stinky and magical, but that solid waste can be used to make animal bedding, which goes right back to the farm. So really cool closed loop food process for recovery, and it keeps it out of the landfill. It keeps it out of our facility too. As you can imagine, we have a 2,000-degree fire going. We don't really want to throw tomato sauce on it. So those kinds of organics are really wet waste, and they've got lots of nutrients in them that can turn into other things. So we want to keep that out of the trash and send it away as much as we can. So whether you're composting at home, you can try backyard composting. If you've got the space, you could, if you live in an apartment, you could try vermicomposting with worms, or you can try, a subscription service like a Garbage to Garden, or We Compost It or AgriCycle, depending on where you live. If you live in the mid-coast, you have Scrap Dogs. These kinds of programs are popping up all over the place. And we're happy to have a partnership with some of them. But again, like we want to be a one-stop shop, but there are so many different options and you got to do what's best for you. Let's see, we've got another question about plastic films, and somebody responded to that question with a link to plastic film recycling. And thank you for doing that, Josephine. Plastic film recycling is a great resource if you have questions about some of those stretchy, rippy, teary plastics. Any of those kinds of plastic films, like grocery bags or bread bags or dry cleaner bags or bubble wrap or Amazon mailers, like those plastic pouches you get your stuff in the mail now. All of those kinds of things could be eligible for recycling with your grocery bags at the retailers. That's actually something that's in a Maine statute right now. According to a Maine statute, you actually, if the retailers are giving you plastic bags, they have to be able to accept them back at the store. So That's something that's in Maine law right now. And even once we start that single-use plastic bag ban, I know things have been a little bit delayed for the state because of COVID and everything that's going on right now. But once that ban kicks in, that is still going to be something that the retailers are obligated to do. So even after we're not getting the grocery bags anymore, we're still going to be stuck with the bread bags and the other types of plastic films that we're getting at the retailers, whether it's produce bags or anything else. So they're going to have a receptacle to take those. So hopefully that question or that answer is helpful. But yeah, Plastic Film Recycling is a great website. It tells you all the nearby drop-off locations and the types of plastic that you can recycle there. Let's see. Somebody asking about what other cities and towns can do to be able to get on board and be able to have, recycling and compost programs. I think advocating for your town is super important. And you've got to do what works best for you. So if you don't have a nearby industrial composter that can take, an entire city's worth of food waste, maybe it's, asking your municipality to do a program for education about composting in your backyard. ecomaine can help with some of that in our communities. We do outreach particularly in our towns because that's where it's most relevant. So we can, help folks start up a composting program at the municipal level to get that stuff out of the trash. I think ultimately it's up to the towns to figure out what's going to work best for them. But as residents, the one thing that you do have the power of is to be able to call your local officials and really tell them, that you feel very strongly about having a composting option, or you feel really strongly about continuing recycling, and to make sure that your voices are heard is super, super important. There's only so much that ecomaine can help with. We need our towns to also step up and help us out with keeping this stuff out of the landfills too. Let's see, is there any other questions here? Is there something near Brunswick that turns trash into renewable energy? There are 3 of these facilities here in the state of Maine. There's ecomaine here in Portland. There's one called Maine Waste to Energy. They're formerly MWAC. They're located in the Lewiston Auburn area. And then there's another one called PERC, which is Penobscot Energy Recovery Company. They're located in Orrington, Maine. So there are 3 of these facilities. They all operate just a little bit differently from one another. I think we may be the only one that has a material recovery facility, a recycling facility right next door. But they all are using kind of similar technology to combust trash, deal with pollution, and reduce, the volume of trash that goes to the landfill. If you have other questions about some of those, we can share out some of those resources. If you want to just send us an email after the fact, we can get you the links to some of those other pages. Let's see, other questions. We will share the link to this recording via email after the session. I think we get the recording within an hour or 2 after we close the Zoom conference. So as soon as we shut this down, we'll get to work on sending you guys out the recording. And again, feel free to let other folks know to attend our Thursday session on the 18th. That one's going to be at 5:30 p.m. So we've been alternating daytime and evening programs so that if folks can't make it for a lunch and learn, they can certainly try to jump on and participate in the evening. Thank you guys again so much for all of your questions. If you have other questions, I'm going to try to answer some of these questions, like the one that just came in from Jordan. Lots of zero waste stores selling silicone items like Ziploc bag alternatives. Are these sustainable? I think one of the benefits to the reusables is that it eliminates the need for the single-use item. I personally do use the stasher bags, those silicone plastic baggie replacements. And I love them so much. I use them for, holding my, I use them as like a pencil bag. I use them for my snacks. They're very multi-purpose, and they also can be used lots and lots of times until they get a rip in them or something like that. They're still very, very practical. Can they be recycled if it reaches its end of life? It really depends on the program. ecomaine wouldn't be able to accept those. There might be a program out there somewhere that can take silicone. But as of right now, as far as I know, that would be a trash item. But at least we're keeping those Ziploc baggies from, entering the landfill 10 times over. We use one bag over and over again for, 5 years. It does add up, and it keeps that stuff out of the trash. So thank you guys so much for all of your questions. If you have other questions, feel free to send them to us via email. You can send them to info@ecomaine.org. And we'd love to take care of you, or feel free to send us a message on Facebook. Thank you again so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. We've got some beautiful weather out there, and hopefully you guys are out there enjoying all of that weather, while many of us are stuck at home.